The morning had begun like any other. Sunlight filtered softly through the curtains of the old Lawson home, a place filled with quiet echoes of memories I cherished. Patricia's laughter still lived in those walls, though she had been gone for years. I often caught myself glancing at her photograph on the mantel, whispering a silent good morning as though she were still with me. But peace, like so many things, is fragile. I was sitting in my chair, reading the morning paper, when her voice cut through the calm like shattered glass. "Pay the rent or get out." It was my daughter, Natalie, her face twisted in anger, her eyes flashing with a hardness that still shocked me no matter how many times I saw it. Before we continue, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell icon, so you never miss a story like this one. For a moment, I simply stared at her, the words hanging in the air between us. Rent? In my own home? The same house where Patricia and I had raised her, where we had celebrated birthdays, Christmas mornings, and long summer evenings on the porch. I wanted to believe she hadn't meant it, that it was just a flare of frustration, but standing in the doorway, I could see Eric, her husband, leaning against the wall with a smirk on his face. His eyes told me otherwise. "This is ridiculous," I said quietly, folding the paper and setting it aside. "Natalie, this is our family's home. There's no rent to pay here." Eric stepped forward, his voice dripping with false politeness. "Edward, times have changed. You're living here without contributing. We've decided that it's only fair you start paying like everyone else. Consider it modernizing." My chest tightened, though I kept my voice calm. "I built this home with my own hands. Your mother and I worked for every brick, every board. This house isn't just walls and roof. It's a legacy." Natalie crossed her arms, her tone sharp. "Legacies don't pay bills, Dad. Either you pay up, or maybe you should think about living somewhere smaller. Eric and I need to start our future, and we can't carry you anymore." Her words stung deeper than she knew. Patricia had always believed Natalie would grow into compassion, into strength. Instead, I saw only entitlement, sharpened by Eric's ambition. I didn't argue. Not then. Instead, I stood slowly, nodding as though their decision had already been made. "If that's how you feel, Natalie, I hear you." I turned and walked toward my room, the house suddenly colder, quieter. Behind me, Eric muttered something smug, but I didn't catch it. I didn't want to. In my room, I closed the door and sat heavily on the edge of the bed. Patricia's photograph rested on the nightstand, her smile frozen in time. I picked it up, running my thumb along the frame. "Do you see what's become of her, Patricia?" I whispered. "The girl we raised, the child you loved so fiercely. She's forgotten." Tears threatened at the corners of my eyes, but I forced them back. This was no time for weakness. Silence could be a weapon, Patricia had once told me, sharper than anger if wielded correctly. I had stayed silent that morning, but not because I was defeated, because a plan was forming. If Natalie and Eric wanted to treat me like a tenant, then perhaps it was time they learned what it truly meant to live under someone else's roof. That night, the house felt heavier than ever before. The same walls that once echoed with warmth now pressed inward with silence so thick it almost had weight. I moved from room to room, touching furniture that Patricia and I had chosen decades earlier, running my hand over the grain of the dining table where Natalie used to sit with her school books spread wide. Every corner whispered memories, but none of them softened the words I had heard that morning. "Pay the rent or get out." I tried to read, I tried to busy myself with the evening news, but my eyes kept drifting back to Patricia's photograph on the mantel. Her gentle smile seemed to ask me the question I could not escape. How did we come to this? Natalie and Eric stayed in their room most of the evening, their muffled voices occasionally seeping through the thin walls. I couldn't catch the words, but I didn't need to. The laughter, sharp and confident, told me they believed they had won something. They thought of me as powerless. I brewed myself a cup of tea the way Patricia used to. 2 spoons of sugar, just enough milk to cloud the surface. Sitting alone at the kitchen table, I could almost feel her presence across from me, her hands curled around her own cup. "Edward," I whispered softly, almost pretending I could hear her voice answer back. "What happened to our daughter? When did kindness turn into cruelty? Was it Eric, or did I fail her somewhere along the way?" A cold draft slipped through the window pane, and I pulled my sweater tighter around me. The night was long, the clock ticking too slowly, each second reminding me of how far I had drifted from the family I thought I knew. Yet beneath the ache was something else, a current, faint but undeniable. Resolve. I realized then that I couldn't meet fire with fire. Raising my voice, demanding respect. It would only feed Eric's smugness and Natalie's defiance. No, if I was to reclaim my dignity, it had to be done differently, quietly, patiently. Like Patricia always told me, the storm doesn't need to shout to break a tree. It just keeps pushing until the roots give way. That night, lying in bed, I listened to the creaks of the old house. Every groan of the wood reminded me of the life built here, of sacrifices made and memories cherished. And yet, for the first time, I accepted something I had resisted for years. This house was no longer a home, not with the way Natalie and Eric had poisoned it. I closed my eyes, whispering into the stillness, "If you were here, Patricia, you'd know what to do. But since you're not, I'll carry your wisdom. I'll act. Not for revenge, but for respect. For us." Sleep didn't come easily, but when it finally did, it carried me not with dreams, but with a vision, a plan taking shape, step by step, hidden beneath silence. The next morning, I stepped outside onto the porch, coffee mug warming my hands against the chill in the air. The neighborhood was waking slowly, birds calling from the trees, the faint rumble of a car starting down the block. It was the kind of quiet scene I used to share with Patricia, back when mornings were filled with gentle conversation instead of heavy silence. Across the street, I noticed Charles Whitman tending to his lawn. His wife, Diane, stood nearby, clipping roses, their easy rhythm a reminder of what steady companionship looked like. Charles spotted me and raised a hand. "Morning, Edward," he called, his voice carrying across the street. I lifted my mug in return, but he must have seen the weariness in my eyes. Within minutes, he and Diane were walking up the path toward me. "You look like a man carrying more than his share today," Charles said as he settled onto the porch step. Diane offered a small, knowing smile as she handed me one of her roses. I exhaled slowly, the weight pressing against my chest, loosening just enough to let words out. "Natalie, she told me to pay rent, in this house, my own daughter." Diane's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, Edward, she didn't." "I'm afraid she did," I said, my voice low. And Eric just stood there, smirking like he'd finally won some kind of game. Charles leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "That man's been trouble since day one. I've seen the way he looks at you, like he's waiting to push you out of the way." I nodded. It's not just him anymore. Natalie's words cut deeper than his. Patricia would be heartbroken if she could hear them. Diane rested a gentle hand on my arm. "Don't let their cruelty make you question your worth. Silence can be sharper than anger, Edward. Sometimes you let people trap themselves in their own pride." Her words struck something deep. Patricia had said nearly the same thing once, years ago when I was angry at a coworker who'd tried to belittle me. "Your dignity doesn't need shouting," she had told me. "It needs patience." Charles straightened, his eyes narrowing with quiet determination. "If you decide you've had enough, you come to me first. You won't face this alone." For a long moment, I simply looked at them, two people who owed me nothing, yet stood by me with more loyalty than my own blood. My chest tightened with gratitude. "Thank you," I said softly. "I don't know what the next step is yet, but I won't forget this." As they walked back across the street, I felt a shift inside me. I wasn't just an old man, enduring humiliation. I was a man with choices, with friends who reminded me I still had strength. Natalie and Eric believed they had caged me in my own home. They were wrong. The walls of this house still remembered the man who built them, and I was ready to remind them too. By the end of the week, the decision had settled in me like a stone, heavy, undeniable, immovable. I could no longer sit quietly and allow Natalie and Eric to chip away at my dignity inside the very home Patricia and I had built. Silence was a powerful weapon, yes, but only if paired with action. Patricia's voice echoed in my memory. When you act, Edward, let it be steady, not rushed. Patience makes truth undeniable. That's what carried me downtown to the law offices of Stephen Caldwell. The building was old but respectable, its brass plaque polished to a shine. Inside, the smell of paper and polished wood wrapped around me like a memory of steadier times. Stephen had been my lawyer for years, through the purchase of our home, through Patricia's estate, through the quiet little battles life inevitably brings. He had never failed me. "Edward," he greeted, rising from behind his desk. His handshake was firm, his eyes sharp with the kind of clarity that came from decades of untangling other people's messes. "It's been too long. What brings you in?" I sat heavily in the leather chair across from him, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "My daughter and her husband have decided I should pay rent, in my own home." His brows lifted slightly, but he didn't interrupt. I told him everything. Natalie's shout, Eric's smug grin, the growing sense that I was being cornered in the place where I should feel safest. When I finished, Stephen leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Edward, you're still the sole legal owner of that house. You hold the deed, not them. They have no authority to demand rent from you." "I know," I admitted, "but it's not about authority. It's about respect. They want to treat me like a tenant? Then perhaps it's time they learn what it really means to live at someone else's mercy?" For the first time, a flicker of a smile touched his lips. "You want to turn the tables?" I nodded. "Not with shouting, not with threats. I want something they can't escape. Something that speaks louder than words." Stephen tapped his desk thoughtfully. "There's a way. If you sell the property quietly, the new owners would have full right to charge rent, or evict if they wish. Natalie and Eric would find themselves at the mercy of strangers, just as they tried to put you at theirs." The idea lit something inside me, a spark of justice. "But we'd need discretion," Stephen continued. "They can't suspect a thing until it's done. You'd need a trustworthy agent, and I'll handle the paperwork. Do you have someone in mind?" "Monica Rivera," I said without hesitation. "Patricia and I worked with her years ago. She's steady, professional." "Good," he said, pulling a notepad toward him. "I'll draft the necessary documents. We'll prepare the listing under a private agreement. By the time Natalie and Eric realize what's happening, it'll already be too late." For the first time in weeks, I felt a true smile cross my face, not of malice, but of relief. "Stephen," I said, leaning forward, "they thought they could strip me of my pride. Let's remind them this house still belongs to me." He extended his hand again, his voice firm. "Then let's begin." The very next afternoon, I found myself parked in front of a modest office tucked between a bakery and a pharmacy. A sign in the window read, "Rivera Realty Group." It had been years since Patricia and I had stepped through those doors, hunting for a vacation property we never ended up buying. But I remembered Monica Rivera, her calm voice, her quiet confidence. She was someone you could trust when the world seemed eager to take advantage. The bell above the door chimed as I entered. Monica looked up from her desk, her eyes lighting with recognition. "Edward Lawson," she said warmly, rising to shake my hand. "It's been a long time. How are you?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "I've seen better days." She studied me for a moment, her smile softening into concern. "Then let's sit down. Tell me what's going on." I took a seat, the leather chair creaking under my weight. For a long moment, I simply stared at the framed photographs on her wall. Families holding keys, smiling in front of new houses, moments of beginnings. Then I spoke, quietly but firmly. My daughter and her husband have decided I should pay rent to live in my own home. They think I'm powerless. I want to prove them wrong, without shouting, without fighting. I want to sell the house quietly behind their backs. Monica didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned forward, her voice calm. Edward, that's no small step. Are you sure this is what you want? I'm sure, I said, my chest tightening with the weight of my decision. This isn't just about money, it's about dignity. I want them to understand what it means to treat someone with cruelty. She nodded slowly. Then we'll do this carefully. No public listing, no signs on the lawn. I'll handle this as a private sale. Discretion is everything. Relief washed through me. Thank you, Monica. Patricia always said you had a good head for this work. Her smile softened. She was a wise woman. Let's honor her memory with how we handle this. We spent the next hour reviewing details. Monica outlined potential buyers she trusted, serious clients, people who wouldn't toy with negotiations. She promised to screen them carefully, to ensure the sale went smoothly and quietly. As I stood to leave, Monica placed a steady hand on my arm. Edward, you're not just selling a house. You're reclaiming your peace. Don't forget that. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street. For the first time in weeks, those shadows didn't feel suffocating. They felt like cover, protection for the plan that was now in motion. When I returned home, Natalie and Eric were sitting in the living room, their heads bent over a stack of bills. Eric glanced up at me, smirk tugging at his lips, as if daring me to question his authority. I said nothing. Instead, I walked past them with calm steps, the papers from Monica folded neatly in my pocket. They thought they had cornered me. They didn't realize I had already found the door. A week later, the demand came again. It was early evening, the sun just beginning to slip behind the trees, when I heard Eric's heavy footsteps in the hallway. He carried a clipboard in one hand, his mouth already twisted into that smug grin that had become his signature. Natalie trailed behind him, her arms crossed tightly, eyes darting anywhere but at me. Edward, Eric began, his tone syrupy with false respect. It's the first of the month. You know what that means. He tapped the clipboard, where a neatly drawn column of figures waited. Rent is due. I folded the newspaper I was holding and set it aside. Rent, I repeated slowly, as if the word were foreign. That's right, he said smoothly. $1,200. You can leave it on the table, and we'll consider you current for the month. Natalie's jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. Her silence told me everything. She had been swept into Eric's current, no longer steering her own choices. I rose without haste, walked to my room, and retrieved an envelope I had prepared earlier. Inside was the exact amount, counted out in bills. I had considered refusing, considered letting Eric's arrogance bounce off me like rain against stone. But Stephen's words echoed in my mind. Let them believe they're in control. The shock will be sharper later. When I returned, I placed the envelope gently on the table. Eric snatched it up, flicking through the bills with greedy precision. Good, he said. See? This arrangement doesn't have to be so difficult. Natalie shifted uneasily, glancing at me as though searching for some reaction, but I gave her none. I'll get next month ready too, I said quietly. Wouldn't want to be late. Eric chuckled, tucking the envelope into his jacket. That's the spirit. Maybe we'll even cut you a discount if you're early. His arrogance filled the room like smoke. He didn't notice the calm in my eyes, the way my silence wasn't surrender but patience. After they left, I sat back down, the weight of the moment pressing on me. Yes, I had paid. Yes, they believed they'd won. But what they didn't know was that Monica was already arranging private showings, and Stephen was finalizing the legal groundwork. The house was already slipping from their grasp, though they strutted like kings within its walls. Later that night, Charles stopped by with a jar of Diane's homemade jam. As we stood on the porch, he asked quietly, You all right, Edward? I smiled faintly. More than all right. Let them collect their rent today. Soon enough, they'll learn what it feels like to be on the other side of the table. Charles studied me for a moment, then nodded. You've still got fight in you. I can see it. As he walked back across the street, I felt Patricia's presence in the cool evening air, as though she approved of my restraint. Silence could cut deeper than words, and one day soon it would. 2 weeks passed before Monica called me with a quiet excitement in her voice. I have a couple, she said. Serious buyers, the kind who won't waste time. They'd like to see the house, discreetly, of course. My chest tightened with anticipation. When? Tomorrow afternoon. I'll keep it low-key. They'll come by as friends, nothing official. Eric and Natalie won't suspect a thing. The following day, I sat on the porch as a silver sedan pulled into the driveway. Out stepped a tall man with salt and pepper hair, and a woman with kind, steady eyes. Monica followed behind, her confident stride smoothing over any suspicion. Edward, this is Dr. Leonard Price and his wife, Dr. Valerie Price, she introduced. They're looking for a property with history, something with character. Pleased to meet you, Leonard said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, the handshake of a man who valued respect. Valerie offered a warm smile. Before I could respond, the front door swung open. Eric emerged, his shirt half tucked, eyebrows raised in suspicion. Natalie hovered just behind him. Who's this? Eric asked sharply. Monica's expression didn't waver. Friends of mine. Thought I'd stop by with them to show them the garden. Edward speaks so highly of this place, I wanted them to see it. Eric's smirk returned, laced with arrogance. Well, enjoy the view. Just don't wander inside. We've got things under control here. Leonard exchanged a glance with Valerie, unbothered by Eric's rudeness. They walked slowly around the yard, taking in the trees, the porch, the quiet dignity of the home. Natalie shifted uncomfortably, clearly embarrassed by Eric's tone, but she said nothing. As they strolled back toward the car, Leonard paused, lowering his voice so only I could hear. Mr. Lawson, this house feels right. We'd like to move forward. Relief and triumph stirred within me. Thank you, I said softly, clasping his hand again. You won't regret it. Eric watched them drive away, suspicion lingering in his narrowed eyes. Strange friends you've got, Edward. Don't forget, you live here because we allow it. I met his stare evenly, the calm in my chest, unshaken. Of course, Eric, I replied, my tone even. Later that evening, Monica called again. They're committed. We'll move quickly, quietly. The contract will be ready within days. As I hung up the phone, I looked toward Patricia's picture on the mantel. Her eyes seemed to gleam with approval. The storm was building, silently just beyond their notice. Soon, Natalie and Eric would learn the cost of arrogance. It was a week after the Price's visit when the first bill arrived. I had been going through my mail at the kitchen table when I noticed a thick envelope marked urgent. At first, I assumed it was junk, until I saw the statement, Header, a credit card company I had never once used. My brows furrowed as I flipped the pages. The charges stared back at me in bold black ink. Electronics, luxury clothes, expensive dinners in restaurants I'd never stepped foot in. The total balance climbed well into the thousands. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands shook as I read line after line, each purchase screaming one truth: someone had been using my name. Before I could process, Eric swaggered into the kitchen, humming as he poured himself a glass of orange juice. He noticed the papers in my hand and smirked. Something wrong, Edward? You look pale. I slid the statement across the table toward him. Care to explain this? He glanced down, barely even pretending to be surprised. Oh, that. Just a little card in your name. Easier to get approved that way since, well, you've got the history and I don't. No big deal. You'll barely notice it. No big deal? My voice was low, but it carried the weight of years of patience thinning. You forged my signature. He waved a dismissive hand. Relax. We'll pay it off, eventually. Look, you're not exactly spending money on anything important, so why not let it go to better use? Besides, you'll be gone soon enough, and Natalie and I will be taking care of everything anyway." The arrogance in his tone sent a chill down my spine, but instead of shouting, I folded the papers neatly, slid them back into the envelope, and stood. "You've made a mistake, Eric," I said softly. He laughed, taking a long sip of his juice. "We'll see about that." The next morning, I walked into Stephen Caldwell's office and dropped the envelope on his desk. He skimmed the papers, his expression hardening with every line. "This is fraud, Edward," he said flatly. "Criminal fraud. And with the sale already in motion, this is exactly the kind of evidence that can bury Eric if he tries to challenge you." "Then let's keep it," I replied, quietly. "I don't want to fight yet. I want him to think he's safe." Stephen nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're letting him write his own downfall?" I leaned back in the chair, a calm I hadn't felt in weeks settling over me. "Exactly. He thinks he's clever, but all he's doing is tightening the noose. When the time comes, I won't need to raise my voice. The truth will do it for me." That evening, Eric strutted around the house, bragging to Natalie about taking care of the finances. She laughed nervously, glancing my way as though unsure whether to believe him. I offered her no words, no accusations, only silence. Because silence, I knew now, was sharper than any blade. The day of the closing arrived with skies as gray as stone. It felt almost symbolic. The house Patricia and I had poured our lives into was about to pass from my hands. Yet instead of sorrow, I felt a quiet strength. This was no loss. It was justice taking shape. Stephen walked beside me into the title office, his briefcase swinging at his side with steady rhythm. Inside, the room smelled faintly of ink and coffee. Papers were stacked neatly across a wide oak table, waiting like silent witnesses. Monica was already there, her expression calm but purposeful. Across from her sat Leonard and Valerie Price, their smiles kind, their eyes steady. "Edward," Leonard said, rising to shake my hand, "we're grateful you chose us. We'll take good care of this place." I nodded, my throat tightening with emotion. "That's all I ask. This house deserves respect." The closing agent, Rachel Cooper, guided us through the mountain of paperwork. Page after page, signature after signature. The weight of ownership shifted quietly away from me. Each pen stroke was a release, not of memory, but of burden. Patricia's voice echoed softly in my heart. "Peace doesn't always come from holding on, Edward. Sometimes it comes from letting go." When Rachel slid the final document across the table, I picked up the pen, signed my name with steady hand, and set it down. "It's done," she said, gathering the papers. "Congratulations, Dr. and Dr. Price. You're the new owners." The Prices clasped my hands warmly. "We won't let you down," Valerie promised. As we left the office, Stephen glanced at me with a rare smile. "Edward, you've just turned the board upside down. They think they hold the power, but in truth, they're standing on a rug you've already pulled." I exhaled, the tension in my chest finally loosening, and they won't even realize it until the ground vanishes beneath them. That evening I returned to the house. Natalie and Eric were laughing in the living room, sipping wine as if the world were theirs to command. Eric glanced at me with mock generosity. "Rent's due in a few weeks, Edward. Don't forget." I offered him a calm nod, hiding the quiet storm inside me. The truth now belonged to time, and time was on my side. In the shadows of that house, unseen but inevitable, justice was already on its way. It was 3 days after the closing when the sound of heavy boots on the porch broke the morning quiet. I opened the door to find Deputy Harris standing tall, an official envelope in his hand. His expression was professional, but there was a flicker of sympathy in his eyes. "Mr. Lawson," he said with a nod, "I've got official documents here. New ownership, rental demand, and eviction notice if terms aren't met. I'll need you to confirm receipt." I signed calmly, thanked him, and watched as he strode away, leaving behind the weight of justice folded neatly in my hand. Inside, Natalie and Eric were seated at the dining table, mid-breakfast. Eric looked up, irritated. "Who was that?" Without a word, I placed the envelope in front of him. His smirk faltered as he tore it open. His eyes skimmed the first lines, and the color drained from his face. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, voice rising with every word. "Eviction notice? Rent owed? This can't be right." Natalie leaned over, reading quickly. Her face shifted from confusion to panic. "Eric, it says here the house was sold weeks ago. The Prices are the new owners. We're tenants now." Eric's hands shook as he flipped through the pages. This has to be a mistake. He can't do this." His eyes shot to me, wild and accusing. "Edward, what did you do?" I met his gaze evenly. "I did exactly what you demanded. I paid rent. And now, so will you. Or you'll leave." Natalie's eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling. "Dad, how could you?" The words pierced me, but not the way she expected. For years I had carried her unspoken disappointment, her coldness, but this time I felt nothing but clarity. "This house was never a prison for me," I said quietly, "but you made it one for yourselves, and prisons always have wardens." Eric pushed back his chair violently, storming into the living room, pacing like a trapped animal. Natalie buried her face in her hands, whispering frantic words I couldn't catch. I turned, walked to the porch, and sat down with a mug of coffee. Across the street, Charles waved knowingly, his eyes sharp with the understanding of a man who had seen justice delivered. Behind me, Eric's voice cracked into a shout, but it no longer mattered. The papers spoke louder than any words I could offer. Their reign over the house was finished. The house felt different after the notice arrived. The laughter that once echoed from the living room was gone, replaced by whispers, muffled arguments, and the occasional sound of slammed doors. Eric's swagger had vanished, his voice sharp with panic every time he spoke. Natalie moved through the halls like a ghost, her eyes red from tears, her footsteps hesitant as if she no longer belonged there. It was 2 nights later when she finally came to me. I was sitting on the porch, sipping tea as the evening settled around me. The crickets chirped steadily in the distance, a reminder that the world kept turning, no matter how hard a family might fracture. "Dad?" Her voice was soft, almost childlike, and when I turned, I saw the daughter I once knew, frightened, unsure, desperate. She sat down beside me, her hands trembling as she twisted the fabric of her sweater. "Please," she whispered, "talk to them, fix this. You can't let them take the house." I looked at her for a long moment. Her face carried Patricia's eyes, the same green flecks that once softened every room, but there was no warmth now, only fear. "This isn't my house anymore, Natalie," I said quietly. "It belongs to the Prices now. They have every right to ask you to pay, or to leave." Her tears spilled over. "I didn't mean it, Dad. I shouldn't have said those things. Eric, he pushed me, but I went along with it. Please don't let them throw us out." Her words twisted in my chest, but not enough to undo the truth. "Natalie, I gave you every chance to treat me with respect. Instead, you chose to follow Eric. You demanded rent from your own father. Now you're learning what that truly means." Before she could answer, Eric stormed out onto the porch, his face red, his fists clenched. "This is on you, old man. You think you're clever? You think humiliating us makes you strong? You'll regret this." I rose slowly, setting my mug aside. My voice was calm, steady, carrying none of the venom he expected. "Eric, strength isn't in shouting. It's in standing firm without losing yourself. And as for regret, no, I won't regret protecting Patricia's memory from being trampled by arrogance." Natalie sobbed quietly, her shoulders shaking, but Eric only cursed under his breath, pacing like a trapped animal. I looked at them both and felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not even satisfaction, but clarity. "You've mistaken kindness for weakness," I said softly. "But kindness, Natalie, is a choice, and I won't choose it for a man who forges my name and a daughter who calls me a tenant in my own home." Natalie looked up, her eyes searching mine as though hoping to find a crack in my resolve. But there was none. Patricia's voice echoed within me, steady and sure. Do what is right, Edward, not what is easy. I turned back toward the quiet street, the glow of Charles and Diane's porch light flickering in the distance. Behind me, the sound of Natalie's sobs and Eric's angry mutters filled the night, but for the first time in years, my heart was at peace. The morning of the eviction came quietly, without the storm of shouting I had expected. The Prices arrived with Deputy Harris, the paperwork neatly prepared. Eric raged, pacing the living room, shouting about lawyers and mistakes, but the law was no longer on his side. Natalie stood frozen, tears streaking her face, clutching a box of belongings, as if holding tighter could undo the truth written on every page. I stayed on the porch, watching the scene unfold with the patience of a man who had already mourned what needed mourning. This house, our house, Patricia's house, was no longer mine, but it had fulfilled its final duty. It had revealed truth. When the moving truck pulled away, carrying their hurried boxes, Natalie glanced back at me. For the first time in years, I saw not anger, not arrogance, but humility. Her lips parted as though to speak, but no words came. Eric yanked her forward, his pride still too stubborn to bend. As the taillights disappeared down the street, the silence left behind was not empty. It was cleansing. Later that week, I sat in Stephen's office, signing the final documents that secured the proceeds from the sale. A large portion went directly into an account I had already prepared, the Patricia Lawson Foundation. Its mission was clear: to provide housing assistance for widows and families in need, the very people Patricia had always wanted to help. This is what she would have wanted, I told Stephen, my voice steady. He nodded, respect softening his features. And it's what you deserve, Edward. A legacy not just of money, but of dignity. That evening I shared dinner with Charles and Diane at their home. Their table was warm, their laughter real, a reminder that family is not always bound by blood. As we raised a glass in Patricia's memory, I felt her presence around me, not in the walls of a house, but in the strength of choices made with love and quiet justice. Looking out the window, I whispered into the night, Patricia, I didn't lose a home today. I gained peace, and your kindness will live on in the lives we help. The wind carried softly through the trees, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly free.